The child. Troy is impregnated by an unknown alien life form, and Dr. Catherine Pulaski joins the Enterprise as the ship's new chief medical officer.
Well, this is the first episode of Season 2, so there are some big changes right away. I think the first thing you see is that Riker has facial hair. We also find out right at the beginning that Geordi is the new chief engineer on the Enterprise. He replaces that rotating stable that they had before.
So he's wearing yellow. Riker is also starting to bulk up a little bit.
Yeah, you can see it in the middle of that shirt there.
Season 2 is when Picard also starts responding to things by saying,
Grand.
Beverly has been replaced by Dr. Pulaski, who, right from the beginning, is a grating personality to everybody else, including the audience.
But I will say she is a much more effective medical presence than Beverly ever was. I'm not saying I like her, I don't like her, but she's better than Beverly in terms of diagnosing and performing medical duties. We get introduced to 10 Forward for the first time.
And Guinan, played by Whoopi Goldberg, which is still a little weird to me. She's a pretty big character, but it's weird to say Whoopi Goldberg was a regular cast member on Star Trek.
Worf is now security chief, which means he's also in yellow. O'Brien is back, and now he's the transporter chief. He disappeared for a long time.
He was only in 2 episodes in the first season, including the pilot.
He must have made a huge impression.
Yeah, all that character development just happens off screen, apparently.
Beverly is off of the show, and the way they tried to make that work into the show was saying she's now the head of Starfleet Medical. There's nobody better than Beverly Crusher to be the head of Starfleet Medical.
Well, see, all they could go off of is what experience does she have? And she can say, well, I've been through all this weird stuff that happened on the Enterprise, and they're like, wow, you made it through that, and so few people died, you must be amazing.
Yeah, but see, they don't do the follow-up questions. She was so clueless most of the time.
Yeah, that's kind of true.
So Riker's still doing his step over the chair as a power move, but in this episode he does it in reverse, which is even cooler.
They gotta step everything up in this new season.
Literally.
I was about to say that, but...
So we get this nice big fanfare to open, we get all this grandiose sweeping music, and it's kind of saying, we're back, we made it through the trial period, we've got new money, and we're going to spend it, and they definitely show it with all the new stuff. The fact that we're adding in all these different sets just for the Enterprise, we're adding in all these new characters, everything seems much more solid. So our A-plot is the Enterprise is transferring virus samples to another location in hopes of developing an antidote to a plasma plague.
Yeah, whatever that means.
Yeah, Stan Lee got a hold of that one. The B-plot is Troy is impregnated by an alien presence. And the C-plot is Wesley is preparing to leave the Enterprise. Wesley's character kind of takes a step backwards because Picard seems incredibly uncomfortable around him again, whereas in the first season, by the end, they were kind of treating Wesley as an equal.
That's true. I would say that's a step back in Picard's development, because Wesley himself seems like he's handling things in a pretty mature way, and he doesn't have his mom looking over his shoulder all the time.
Yeah, from the unemployment office. So Wesley's in 10 Forward, and he's getting ready to depart the Enterprise, but it's revealed that he might not want to. He's just doing it because it's what's expected of him. He has a heart-to-heart with Guinan, and we figure out what kind of character Guinan is.
She's very much the character that other characters will go to for advice. She's good at figuring out what's really bothering people.
So in other words, she's a way more effective counselor than the counselor.
When they're talking there, I really like the way the ship turns, and you see the stuff outside the view window, and then you see the light coming in. It's a really effective way to make it look like the ship's turning, and most people probably wouldn't even think about it.
So let's talk about Troy. This weird spark is going around the Enterprise. It eventually ends up in Troy's room, where it impregnates her.
When the little spark is floating around in the room, the way they try to make it light up the environment is just shining a flashlight at the wall, so it doesn't quite match up to where the spark is moving, but it's fine.
Dr. Pulaski figures out that Troy is pregnant, and she's going to have the baby in 36 hours, where normal gestation is 10 months, because the episode's only 45 minutes, so we have to get moving. They have a staff meeting to talk about it, and they keep using the words impregnated, but the way they're describing it and the way it happened, it really sounds like she was violated by this alien presence.
They all kind of talk around Troy. It's strange that they don't go right up to her and say, what do you think about this? How do you feel about this? They just talk about its effects on the rest of the crew, basically. And that carries through the entire episode.
And she eventually has to stick up for herself and say, I'm having the baby. And then Picard says,
And it seems that the discussion is over.
They don't seem to take the threat seriously enough.
They don't know what happened at all or what the entity is or anything. But for most of the episode, they just kind of say, let's take a step back and just watch it develop.
And Dr. Pulaski thinks she knows everything. Just because Troy's pregnant, she says everything's fine. But she has no idea. She doesn't know what's going on. She's in the same boat as everybody else. And when Troy's in sickbay and she's going into labor and Data calls Worf and says, bring your security team, Dr. Pulaski kind of shakes her head. But again, she has no idea what's actually going on.
That made me mad. This baby is developing so quickly. Who knows what it's going to do to Troy? She's judging things based on the information that she knows from other pregnancies, but she even at times seems unfamiliar with the way Betazoid pregnancies work. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, since we're on the subject of Dr. Pulaski, some people treat Data like he's just a machine, but she even has a disdain for him. There's one point where Troy needs somebody with her, and Data says, I'll be that person. And then Pulaski says,
Counselor Troy is going to need the comfort of a human touch and not the cold hand of technology.
Doctor.
what a bitch.
I agree that she's a bitch, but I didn't feel like she had disdain for Data. I think she just kind of brushed him off very easily.
She calls him Data at one point, and he says, my name is Data. And then she basically just brushes that off too and says, whatever.
I mean, I would have done the same thing, and I would have called him Data just because it annoyed him, probably. I guess I relate to her a lot now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, because you're a bitch too.
I didn't think she had anything against him. I thought that she just didn't take him seriously as a person, which I think from her perspective is valid.
Data has been around for a whole season with all these people. He is a member of the crew, and she doesn't know that. She's the new one. She should be working to kind of get to know everybody.
Who knows how much exposure she's had to androids or to AI of that complexity. If I were her, I wouldn't expect anything special out of a robot. I would think it's just a robot.
To me, she just seems like the stereotypical old person who kind of waves away technology.
I do think that's an element of it.
I don't like her.
I'm kind of torn because, I mean, in real life I would hate her, but I kind of like her role in the show.
So then Troy gives birth. It all goes very smoothly, but I think it would have been way more exciting if it had been like Men in Black.
Kay, damn, man. Kay, something's peeking.
Proactive midwives, 54th and Madison. You're headed out of town, Reggie. What's going on?
Oh, well, we're...
And then again, Pulaski saying, I know everything. She says,
There's no threat, Lieutenant. You and your men can relax. It's just a baby.
how do you know that? How do you know it's not something masquerading as a baby?
The whole idea that they let the baby develop, I mean, they check in on Troy every once in a while, but they need to have her in sickbay the entire time. Something could happen at any moment unexpectedly.
Later, Pulaski says, if I examined her now, it would be as if she never even had a baby. I wouldn't be able to tell. So in subsequent episodes, we never have to bring it up again. Very well done.
I didn't think about it from that perspective, but yeah. When Troy goes into labor, Data's reaction is so stupid. It's such a typical 90s pregnant woman guy, unexpected, not knowing what to do reaction. It's so dumb and so broadly played. Marina Sirtis's acting in this episode is really good, I thought. She has much more opportunity in this episode to demonstrate what she can do, and she does a really good job with it, despite her character being written kind of stupidly, I think.
So Troy names her child Ian. He's growing very quickly. Troy's also not even watching this kid that they know nothing about. She's letting him interact with other kids on the ship, just walk all over the place.
Everything about her pregnancy and about her having a kid is treated as if it's a totally normal occurrence. Even the pregnancy scene, when she actually gives birth, is treated as if it's a magical thing, you know, like a normal pregnancy would be handled in an episode.
They're still trying to move these virus samples, but they have to contain them because if they get out, they'll kill everybody. So it turns out some of the virus is growing, which means that eventually everyone's just going to die. They can't contain it. It's going to burst out of its container. So then they say, why don't we just beam it off the ship? And they say we can't jettison it either, because the first thing it would come into contact with, it would infect them.
Send out a warning that there's something there so that other people won't contact it. It's better than just leaving it on the ship either way and letting it get out onto the ship where you know everybody's going to die.
But there have to be other ships, even the Enterprise. When they get rid of material that's dangerous to others, what do they do with it?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
I like how the doctor guy is always leaning against the container, or he has his hands on it, and it's got that super deadly virus in it. But he's just relaxing up against it all the time.
So I have a question about how the transporters work. They can beam things from one place to another without them having to be in the transporter room. So what is the transporter room for?
They say the reason it's growing inside the container is because it's being exposed to some kind of specific radiation. Obviously, it's the only other major plot element in this episode, which is Ian. And Ian realizes that, so then he decides that he needs to die.
Ian's entire reason for being born is something that he himself is aware of.
He was a life force entity that was curious about humans, so figured the best way to learn about them and understand them was by going through their life cycle. The kid himself is not a bad actor.
Yeah, I was surprised. What did bother me was Troy's tears, which this is another thing that you probably wouldn't have noticed back in the day on regular broadcast TV, but they're not real tears. She's got some kind of weird gel that she's got on her face.
To wrap up our C plot, Wesley chooses not to leave, decides to stay on the Enterprise.
When Wesley tells Picard that he's going to stay on the Enterprise, you can see Picard trying to hide how disappointed he is.
I want to remain on the Enterprise.
I liked Wesley in this episode, though. He did feel like a more developed character, a bit more suited to the age of the actor.
First episode for Season 2, The Child. Overall?
The subplots for this episode are handled really well, and the whole episode is put together pretty well. It's well acted, it's well edited, and well written for the most part. But that main storyline is so bad. Everything with Troy and her kid and her pregnancy, nobody reacts to it in a realistic way, and just the way everything develops is so poorly handled. Troy herself doesn't have a lot to do. She's mostly a passive character, despite being so important to what's going on. I would give the episode a C+.
I'm going to give this one a B+. It's a really good opening episode for the season. There's good pacing, there's good writing. Troy is really showing off her acting chops. I was very impressed. There's a really good juggling of an A, B, and C plot, whereas a lot of Season 1 episodes couldn't even handle one plot at a time. Everybody seems way more comfortable and consistent, and everything seems more solidified and put together, and that goes for the actors and the production crew. The only thing I didn't like is how Troy's storyline kind of goes nowhere and ends up exactly where it left off, and they don't really investigate it any further, but I did like this one. I'm going to give this one a B+.
Okay, that's way too high.